As I drove along a dusty road, the bright midday sun made the air almost suffocating, creating a bleak and hot atmosphere. Suddenly, something caught my eye at the side of the road. In the distance, it looked like a large, motionless shadow, a figure that for a brief moment seemed part of the arid landscape. But as I got closer, I realized that it was no mere shadow. It was a large dog, lying on the ground, panting and visibly exhausted. The scene was disturbing. The animal looked exhausted, as if it had fought a battle against the heat and its own survival. Its fur was matted, dirty and full of knots, and its tongue hung from its mouth, dry and cracked from the sweltering heat. It could barely lift its head, but when it did, it let out a heart-rending wail, as if it were calling for help with its last breath of energy. With every second, its situation became more desperate. As I got closer, I could see a thick, worn rope tied around his neck. It was tight, with deep marks on his skin, indicating that he had probably been chained for a long time. Perhaps he had managed to escape from a situation of abuse, or worse, a dogfight. Now there he was, lying on the side of a deserted road, completely exhausted and with his body on the verge of collapse. The look of suffering on the dog's face was impossible to ignore. He tried to lift his head, but it was clear that his strength was exhausted. Even without knowing exactly what he had been through, it was clear that he needed urgent help. Without hesitation, I parked the car on the side of the road and approached him, trying not to scare him even more. I spoke to him in a soft tone, trying to reassure him, but the animal barely reacted, just looking at me with a mixture of pain and distrust. I realized that he was too weak to get into the car by himself. So, with the utmost care, I bent down and tried to lift him. The task was not easy. He was large and heavy, and his body seemed completely drained of strength. It took all my energy to get him into the back seat of the car. Once he was comfortable, I turned on the air conditioning and gave him some water. He drank with difficulty, but his eyes showed cautious relief. Even in the midst of his extreme weakness, there was still a glimmer of hope in his eyes. As I drove towards the nearest shelter, the dog whimpered softly in the back seat. His breathing was irregular, shallow, and with each passing minute I knew that his life was hanging by a thread. The heat had taken its toll, and his dehydration was severe. However, I was determined not to let him succumb to this cruel fate. Upon arriving at the shelter, the veterinary team immediately realized the gravity of the situation. They rushed to help him, taking him inside and beginning emergency care. The initial diagnosis was clear: severe dehydration, malnutrition, and extreme exhaustion. Compacto, as I decided to call him, was in critical condition. The first few days were a constant battle. The staff worked tirelessly to rehydrate, feed, and stabilize him. Every drop of water, every small meal was a victory. Compacto's recovery was slow and full of challenges, but he was a fighter. Little by little, his condition began to improve. With patience and great care, he began to eat better, accept more water, and finally regain his strength. His transformation was remarkable. This giant animal, who had been on the brink of death, began to show signs of life. What was most surprising was his sweetness. Despite his intimidating size, Compacto had an incredibly gentle nature. He showed quiet gratitude, looking at his caretakers with eyes that seemed to understand how much they had done for him. As his health improved, Compacto quickly became the favorite of the shelter staff. His loving personality won everyone over. He loved to snuggle with the staff, seeking affection and offering unwavering loyalty in return. It was as if he knew that his second chance at life had arrived, and now he wanted to enjoy every moment. Days passed, and Compacto was finally healthy enough to be adopted. The transformation was complete. The dog who was once on the brink of death was now a healthy, happy, and energetic giant. He, who had been discarded and abandoned as if his life had no value, was now surrounded by love and care. Compacto found a forever home with a loving family who were enchanted by his sweet and affectionate personality. They didn't mind that he was a giant because they knew that inside he was a true treasure. The affection and attention he now received were proof that, with love and dedication, Any being can rise from adversity. Compact, the gentle giant had found his place in the world. A story of resilience and hope that reminds us that, even in the darkest moments, love can transform lives. He now ran free, full of energy and joy, alongside a family that adored him and would never let him go through the suffering he had once faced.